You never think it'll happen to you. You hear about it in other people's lives. Someone got caught cheating, someone else fell out of love, someone walked away from a 5-year marriage like it meant nothing. But when you're the one standing there with the pieces of your life crumbling in your hands, it's not a story anymore. It's your reality. And mine started unraveling on a warm August night, at a party where everyone wore their best smiles and their darkest secrets like designer cologne. I was Roman, just a regular guy who married a woman I believed I'd grow old with. Hillary, God, she was stunning. Not just in that surface level way either, at least not at first. She had a spark, a kind of fire that pulled people in. We met at a conference in Seattle, some boring tech seminar I can barely remember now, but she was sitting in the front row, asking smart questions and laughing with a confidence that made the whole room lean closer. We got married a year later. Everyone said we were perfect together. But perfect can rot from the inside, and it took me too long to notice the smell. The first few years were good. We traveled, we laughed, we even thought about kids. But slowly, something shifted. It was like trying to hold on to smoke. Conversations got shorter, kisses became habits, and I started to feel like a guest in my own marriage. Hillary began dressing differently, bolder, tighter clothes, late-night girls' dinners that came with vague explanations and phone screens flipped down. I asked questions at first, the kind that are laced with nervousness but still hopeful, and she always had a smile ready, a soft deflection, a quick change of subject. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself she loved me. That was my first mistake. Everything changed the night of Chris's birthday. He threw this huge weekend party at a cabin outside the city. All our friends were invited. I wasn't thrilled about going, but Hillary insisted. She took hours to get ready, curled her hair, red lipstick, a silver dress that clung to her like second skin. She looked more like she was heading to a club than a friend's backyard barbecue. I told her she looked amazing, and she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That smile, it would haunt me later. I didn't know it yet, but she had dressed like that for someone else. Someone who was already there, laughing by the bonfire, holding a drink, watching her with eyes that weren't mine. The man she had been cheating with for months. It wasn't subtle, not really. I caught the glances, the touches that lasted too long, the way her laugh changed when he spoke. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted with something worse than jealousy, certainty. I was caught cheating once, in college, and I recognized that exact dance of guilt and thrill playing out on her face. I waited until most people were too drunk to notice and pulled her aside near the trees. I asked her straight up, "Who is he?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, then smiled that cruel, condescending smirk I didn't recognize. "Don't embarrass yourself, Roman," she said, and tried to walk past me. I grabbed her wrist, not hard, just enough to keep her from slipping away again. She turned on me, fast and brutal. Slapped me across the face so hard I saw white. Then she laughed. Loud. Mocking. People turned. Eyes fell on me. And she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you were half the man he was, maybe I wouldn't be bored all the damn time." The crowd howled. It wasn't just laughter, it was humiliation. I was shattered. That was the moment I realized I'd lost her long before this night. I left. I didn't even try to talk to her again. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove to my friend Marcus's place across town. He handed me a beer, didn't ask questions, and let me crash on his couch. I lay there all night, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the infidelity started. Was it those late nights she claimed were work events? The gym she suddenly needed 5 times a week? The random new passwords on her phone? I saw all the signs, and still, I chose to ignore them. Maybe I thought love was supposed to be painful. Maybe I thought if I just tried harder, she'd come back to me. She was in the shower. I heard the water running, and I stood in our bedroom, still smelling like the bonfire and stale beer. I knew what I was going to do before I even did it. Her phone was on the dresser, unlocked. It was almost like she wanted me to see it. I went to her messages and found what I was looking for. The guy from the party, his name was saved as Kara in her contacts. Subtle and disgusting, the thread was filled with months of cheating texts, photos, voice notes, conversations that made my chest ache. But the worst part? The jokes. The way they laughed about me. Called me boring. Weak. A placeholder. That's when the rage hit me. Not the kind that explodes. The quiet kind. The kind that plans. The kind that breathes revenge. I heard the water stop. She came out wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, skin flushed from the heat. She saw the phone in my hand, and instead of panic, she laughed. Just laughed. "Took you long enough," she said, and walked right past me. That laugh. I can still hear it sometimes when the apartment is too quiet. It wasn't nervous, or apologetic, or even surprised. It was triumphant. Like she'd won something. Like I'd been part of some game she already finished playing. Hillary didn't try to explain, didn't apologize, didn't even pretend to care that I'd found out. She just threw her towel in the hamper and walked into the closet like we'd been talking about dinner plans. I stood there, holding the phone like it might start screaming. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't look away. The messages between her and the guy Nathan, I found out later, that was the kind of infidelity you don't just stumble into. That was cultivated. Federal enjoyed. She called him my king in one of the texts. I hadn't been her king in a long time, maybe never. And still, that wasn't even the worst of it. I sat on the edge of the bed and kept scrolling through her chats, and that's when I saw it. A different thread. A different name. Tony. My stomach dropped. I opened it. At first, it was just friendly back and forth work jokes, memes, the kind of thing you might not blink at. But then came the selfies. Flirty captions. Suggestive late-night messages. Then audio recordings. And finally, plans. Not vague ones, either. Same hotel next Friday? God, that night in your car was wild. I still think about it when I'm with him. With me. I felt something inside me break and fold in on itself. Two men. Two separate lives. Two betrayals layered on top of each other like rotting wallpaper. She wasn't just cheating, she had created an entire world where I was the fool. She walked out of the closet wearing leggings and a sports bra, like nothing had happened. Like we weren't standing in the ruins of our marriage. I asked her who Tony was, and she actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, that," she said, stretching like she was about to go jog. "That ended weeks ago." "Don't be so dramatic." "Ended. Weeks ago." Like that made it better. Like I was supposed to thank her for her timing. I couldn't speak. There was no yelling, no accusations. Just silence thick enough to choke on. She turned to leave for the gym or wherever the hell she actually went these days, but before she did, she tossed over her shoulder, "If this is your big meltdown moment, let me know so I can be somewhere else. I'm not doing the whole emotional, insecure husband thing." And that's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little. There was no fixing this. No therapy. No pleading. No romantic vacation to rekindle things. She had burned the bridge and built a new one with someone else. Twice. I wasn't just caught cheating unemotionally, I was discarded. Replaced. Laughed at. And maybe the worst part was realizing how long she'd been gone from this marriage without ever physically leaving. So I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "We're done." And she smirked and said, "I figured." Then she closed the door behind her like she couldn't wait to leave. I spent the rest of the day packing up what I needed: my laptop, some clothes, my old guitar, the only things that didn't feel tainted. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Hell, maybe it never had. I stayed at Marcus's again that night. We talked for hours over whiskey and old video games, but I kept replaying it in my head: the party, the slap, the laughter, the infidelity, the other man, and then the other one. 2 men. How many more were there? How many times did she leave our bed and walk into someone else's arms like it was the most normal thing in the world? It was Marcus, blunt as ever, who said it first. You know you gotta torch the whole thing, right? No second chances. No slow goodbyes. Just revenge your way. And maybe revenge didn't mean ruining her life, but it sure as hell meant getting mine back. Better. Stronger. Cleaner. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. Told her everything. She raised an eyebrow and said, "With that much evidence, this will be the easiest divorce you'll ever see." I want it easy. I needed it. No mess, no emotions. Just a clean break. But nothing stays clean for long. Because a week later, I got a message from Tony. Yes, him. The second guy. Said he'd just found out she was married when I messaged him on social media. He looked shocked in his profile photo, like a deer blinking into headlights. Turns out she had told him she was separated. That I was clinging to her, making things complicated. He apologized. Said he had no idea. Said he'd been cheated on in the past too and felt sick knowing he was now the other man. We talked for an hour. And somewhere in that hour, I found myself laughing. Not at him. Not at myself. But at the situation. Because somehow, in all of Hillary's lies, she'd managed to hurt everyone. Even the guys she used as escape routes. I couldn't help but think of how confident she looked that night by the bonfire. How proud. How untouchable. But now things were shifting. People were talking. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being laughed at. Maybe the best revenge is just surviving with your soul intact. I wasn't quite there yet, but I could see the road. The divorce papers came in a simple manila envelope, thick with details but cold and impersonal. It was almost laughable how neatly the end of a marriage could be bound by staples and legal phrases. I didn't even need to fight for anything, she didn't contest it. No apology. No letter. Just a signature scrawled in that same careless handwriting I used to find so charming on birthday cards and love notes. The irony was sharp. 5 years of memories reduced to a few sheets of paper and a final line at the bottom: irreconcilable differences. Yeah, you could say that. Multiple infidelities tend to do that. I stayed out of the apartment. Gave her time to pack whatever she wanted to take. I didn't want to see her again. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't want her to see what she'd done to me. The nights were quiet and long, spent piecing myself back together in a guest room filled with someone else's furniture. Marcus was a good friend, kept me fed, distracted, sane. But even he couldn't stop the thoughts that creeped in around 2 a.m., when the world felt too quiet and the bed too empty. You don't spend 5 years with someone and just forget. It's a slow fade, like ink bleeding from a photograph left in the rain. The worst part? I started to doubt myself. Wondering if I had missed something huge, if I was ever enough, or if she was already planning her escape the day we said I do. And then something else happened. A message. Not from Tony this time, but someone entirely different. A woman named Amber. Her name meant nothing to me until she explained she was Nathan's girlfriend. Or ex-girlfriend, now. She'd seen the messages. Somehow found my email. Said she thought I deserved to know that Hillary wasn't just cheating with her boyfriend, but doing it in places that made my stomach turn. our guest room, our couch, our goddamn kitchen counter. Every inch of my home, every memory I had touched, had been defiled while I was at work, running errands, being the loyal husband she no longer had use for. Amber and I ended up talking a few times. Both of us scorned, both of us bleeding from wounds we didn't ask for. There was something strangely healing about it, sharing the same battlefield scars with someone else. She told me Hillary and Nathan had been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year. I had thrown her a surprise anniversary dinner halfway through that timeline. Bought her diamond earrings. Cooked her favorite pasta. And the whole time, she'd been slipping off her ring whenever she thought I wasn't looking. I asked Amber if she ever suspected. She laughed bitterly and said, "I thought I had trust issues. Turns out, I didn't have enough." It was around then that I stopped grieving and started rebuilding. I found a new apartment. Smaller, quieter, with creaky floors and zero memories of her. I started going to the gym again, not because I thought it would win anyone back, but because I needed to feel like my body was mine again. Like I wasn't just a ghost living in the ruins of someone else's dream. The gym helped. So did running. And music. And eventually, therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry her poison into the next chapter of my life. But then, as life loves to do, another twist came. I ran into Hillary at the grocery store of all places, barely 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. She looked different. Tired. Hollow-eyed. Still beautiful, but in a way that felt brittle, like glass under pressure. She smiled when she saw me, of course she did. "Roman," she said, like she hadn't humiliated me in front of a crowd, lied to me for months, and laughed when I confronted her with proof of her cheating. I just nodded. Kept walking. She followed me down an aisle. "So that's it? You're just done?" she asked, like she had the right to be confused. I turned to her, finally stopping, and said the only thing that felt honest, "I'm not the one who walked away." She stood there, stunned for once, her mouth slightly open. And then she said something that struck me to my core, "You're actually kind of hot now. All this bitterness suits you." I didn't reply. I just left. But as I walked to my car, I realized something important. Her words didn't hurt anymore. They didn't matter. Because she was looking back while I was already facing forward. Looking back, I know I was caught cheating on in more ways than one. Not just with other bodies, but with lies, with silence, with absence. She was gone long before she physically left. And the tragedy wasn't just the betrayal, it was the years I spent thinking her distance was my fault. It wasn't. It never was. I went home that night and deleted the last photo I had of us together. We were at the beach, smiling into the sunset, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive. Now I know that smile was just her cover. A mask she wore while her heart belonged to someone else. The silence in my new apartment felt different than the silence I left behind. It wasn't cold or suffocating. It was clean. Untouched. No echoes of arguments, no distant hum of betrayal hiding in the corners. Just me, a mattress on the floor, a stack of books, and the kind of peace that feels earned. It's a strange thing, climbing out of the wreckage of infidelity. You learn how strong you actually are only when you're forced to rebuild from the foundation up. I was doing that, brick by brick. New friends. New habits. Hell, I even started painting again, something I hadn't touched since college. And for a little while, it felt like Hillary was just a bad dream I'd finally woken up from. But of course, peace has a way of being temporary when someone like her is involved. One night, around 10 p.m., I got a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it cautiously and there she was. Hillary. No warning, no message. Just standing there like she belonged. Her mascara was smudged, hair tangled, and she had the look of someone who'd made a mistake but still hadn't decided whether it was her fault. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. She leaned against the doorframe and said, "Nathan's gone. Tony too. Turns out I'm not so good at picking loyal men." I almost laughed, cheating on two people and being surprised they eventually left. But what really stunned me was her next line, "I've been thinking about us lately. How it all went wrong. Us." As if that word still held any power. I let her speak, mostly out of morbid curiosity. She talked about feeling lost, about how she never thought I'd leave, how she'd convinced herself I was just there. Like furniture. Reliable. Silent. Permanent. It was a twisted kind of compliment. And then, as if it would somehow undo everything, she said, "I never stopped loving you, Roman." That was the moment I knew she wasn't sorry for the infidelity, she was just sorry it didn't end better for her. I looked at her, the same woman who slapped me in front of everyone and humiliated me at a party for reacting like a human being, and I felt nothing. No rage. No longing. Just exhaustion. The kind that sits in your bones. "You love the version of me who tolerated being lied to," I said. "That guy's gone." She didn't argue. Maybe she knew it wouldn't work. Maybe she didn't care anymore. She left without asking to come in, and I never saw her again in person after that night. But the damage had already been done. Not just to our marriage, but to who I had been. The man who trusted blindly. The man who believed love meant endurance, no matter the cost. That man had died somewhere between discovering the second phone thread and hearing her laugh in the shower like nothing mattered. Weeks passed. I started dating again, slowly, cautiously. The first few tries were rough. I kept waiting for lies to bubble up, for red flags to slap me in the face. Trauma doesn't ask for permission, it just shows up and demands attention. But then I met someone, Jenna. She was quiet in the best ways. Observant. Patient. A school counselor, of all things. She didn't push. Just existed beside me like a calm current. We started talking, then walking, then seeing each other every weekend. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be caught cheating on again. And yet, even as I moved forward, Hillary's shadow lingered, especially when I got a phone call from an unknown number one afternoon. It was Amber again. She sounded nervous, rushed. "I thought you should know," she said. "There was another guy. His name's Derek. I only found out because I saw a post on a mutual friend's story, her and him at some rooftop bar, holding hands. This was during the time she was supposedly exclusive with Nathan. I couldn't believe it. Another one. Another man. That made three, at least three. My head spun. How many others had been buried in the quiet spaces between her kisses and lies? It wasn't just cheating anymore, it was habitual. It was predatory. Hillary had built an entire lifestyle out of infidelity, each man a different mask she wore to fill whatever hollow she was pretending not to feel. And I had been the decoy husband. The one she showed to family and friends while she was living an entirely different life behind the scenes. Amber and I talked for a long time that night. We even joked about forming a support group, Hillary's Survivors Anonymous. But behind the laughter was a strange kind of mourning. Not just for the people we lost, but for the versions of ourselves we had to bury in order to survive. The next day, I woke up early. Went for a run. Made strong coffee. Sat at my window as the city stirred awake. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was just done. Done trying to understand a woman who didn't want to be understood. Done carrying the weight of someone else's shame. I was finally free. There's something strangely poetic about the way a life resets. You think the world should shatter when your marriage collapses, when you've been humiliated, caught cheating on not once, not twice, but with a roster that felt more like a rotating cast than a one-time mistake. But it doesn't. The sky doesn't darken. The buildings don't collapse. Instead, the world just keeps moving. Trains still run, bills still come, and the sun still rises like it owes you nothing. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this: the universe doesn't stop for heartbreak. It waits for you to catch up. Months passed. Seasons changed. My apartment became a home. The mattress was replaced by a proper bed. I bought curtains. Framed art. Even tried my hand at cooking things beyond takeout leftovers. I didn't realize it at the time, but with every small step, I was taking back the parts of me that had been slowly siphoned off during those 5 years of false smiles and hidden messages. Each day without Hillary's shadow was a form of revenge in itself. Not the dramatic kind. Not the fire and glory kind. But the kind where simply thriving in the face of betrayal feels louder than any confrontation ever could. Jenna stayed. She never asked for the full story, but I told her anyway. All of it. Not for pity, but because I refused to carry secrets anymore. She listened, didn't flinch. She told me something I'll never forget: what someone does to you is never your fault. But how you let it change you, that's your power. That night, I knew I wouldn't just survive this. I'd rebuild better. Wiser. Stronger. But life still had one final twist to deliver. I got an invitation in the mail. Handwritten. Classy. It was for the birthday of the same friend whose party had exposed everything. He and I had reconnected barely, but I figured I'd show my face. Closure, maybe. Or just curiosity. I arrived dressed sharper than I ever had when I was with Hillary. Not because I wanted to impress anyone. Just because I could. Because I felt better. And then I saw her. Hillary. She wasn't alone, Derek was with her. But their body language was stiff. Awkward. She looked thinner. Not glowing thinner, but drained thinner. Like someone trying to survive on a diet of denial and damage control. Our eyes met across the yard, and for the first time ever, she looked nervous. Not smug. Not amused. Just unsure. She started walking toward me, but I turned away and started a conversation with someone else. That moment, ignoring her, denying her the chance to rewrite the story, was the most satisfying revenge I'd ever tasted. Later that night, I caught wind of some gossip floating around the party. Apparently, Derek had been caught texting his ex. Someone had seen him at a bar the week before, same bar he used to take Hillary to. She was, once again, on the other side of cheating. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I left that party with a smirk I didn't bother hiding. Back home, I sat on my balcony, watching the city below flicker and breathe. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not patched up. Not surviving. Just whole. Hillary's chapter in my life was finally closed. The ink dry. The pages sealed. What she did, her web of infidelity, her lies, her slaps and laughter, had shaped me, yes. But they didn't define me. I started a new job. Something I'd always wanted but never pursued because it wasn't stable enough for her standards. I traveled solo for the first time. Spent a weekend in the mountains with no phone signal and no one to answer to. And in one quiet moment up there, sitting near the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley, I realized I had made it through. Not just the divorce. Not just the heartbreak. But through her. Through all the cheating. All the humiliation. All the cracks she carved into my self-worth. This wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the beginning of me. So here's what I'll leave you with. Sometimes, when you're caught cheating on, when you're drowning in the weight of infidelity, when you think the world has ended, it's really just the universe ripping out the rot, making space for something far better. It won't feel like a gift at first. It'll feel like fire. Like grief. But eventually, that fire becomes your forge. And you come out stronger than the version of yourself they tried to break. I don't hate Hillary. But I sure as hell don't miss her. And that, my friend, is what real freedom feels like.